What's up, YouTube? I'm making this video to talk about federal taxes being voluntary, the income tax. And I have a couple clips of the IRS commissioner saying it himself, if you don't believe me.
Mr. Miller, I want to talk a little about the culture of the organization. I was looking at the note, your bio, 90,000 employees, $12 billion budget. You've been there 25 years. I'm concerned, and I guess to start off, we've got a mission statement there. I'm very concerned about the breadth and the depth of maybe what's going on. I think a lot of employees probably do a good job, but I've been a person that's been in business 30 years and run larger organizations. So you've got a mission statement in terms of talking about working for the American people, doing what's right, playing by the rules. Is that something that's internalized at the IRS? Or is that just something on a website?
So I believe, Congressman, it's internalized, and the vast majority of our folk are hardworking, incredibly honest people. I'm going to tell you, and you guys should hear that as these discussions occur, it's damaging to the morale of those people. It's probably ultimately damaging to the sense of voluntary compliance, which underlies our entire tax system.
We have to maintain the confidence in the system because it's a voluntary system of payment of our taxes. Agreed.
This mirrors the sworn testimony provided by Dwight Avis in 1953, when the IRS chief stated to the House Ways and Means Committee that the income tax was 100% voluntary and the liquor tax was 100% enforced. It may come as a shock to many Americans who have difficulty grasping the concept that the federal income tax is both voluntary and mandatory. The federal income tax is voluntary for American nationals, those born in one of the 50 states of the Union, and mandatory for statutory U.S. citizens born in federal territory. It must be understood that the national government wants to keep you in their club for as long as possible, so it's not surprising that they, at times, will not divulge the total picture of who is liable to pay the tax and who is not. For Americans who were born and currently reside and work in the constitutional republic, they aren't naturally subject to the income tax because of the U.S. Supreme Court Pollock decision in 1895. However, those Americans often make a voluntary election to be taxed, whether they do so knowingly or not, and when they do, they're viewed by the national government as U.S. resident aliens. Once they volunteer, subsequent payments become mandatory, much similar to the process of joining a country club. Here's 26 CFR section 1.871-1A, which spells out that people who aren't naturally subject to the federal income tax may elect to become taxpayers. However, non-resident alien individuals may elect under section 6013G or H to be treated as U.S. residents for purposes of determining their income tax liability under Chapters 1, 5, and 24 of the Code. Full comprehension of the true meaning of this implementing regulation lies with discerning the difference between U.S. resident aliens and non-resident aliens. It's critical to also know the difference between the constitutional United States, the 50 states of the Union, and the statutory United States, a corporate entity consisting of the District of Columbia and U.S. territories like Puerto Rico and Guam. U.S. resident aliens are essentially foreigners who must be granted permission to live and work in either the constitutional republic or the statutory United States. A non-resident alien is the government's term for those born in, reside, and work in the 50 states. Going back to the regulation 1.871-1A, the election they're referring to is made when a non-resident alien files his or her first Form 1040 income tax return, allowing the government to treat them as U.S. residents for purposes of determining their income tax liability, and not considering them as American nationals with unalienable rights. From then on, like being a member of a club, future dues, meaning taxes, become mandatory until the member formally chooses to end his or her participation.
To date, nobody has been able to show that there is a law for the average American citizen working day in and day out to pay an income tax.
But We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education put a full-page ad in the USA Today on July 7th, 2000. And within the body of that ad was a $50,000 challenge for anyone that could show the law. And to me, $50,000 is a lot of money. So I went after that and did the research based on the fact that I thought, let's put this baby to bed. I'm hearing all these rumors. I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. I'll answer these people's questions that are asking me, and then I'll win this $50,000. And, based on the research that I did throughout the year 2000 and that I'm still doing, I have not found that law. I've asked Congress. We've asked a lot of people in the IRS commissioners, helpers. They can't answer, because if they answer, the American people are going to know that this whole thing is a fraud.
There is no law. There is no law that requires the average American worker in the private sector to pay a direct, unapportioned tax on their labor and compensation for services. There is no law.
I really expected that, of course, there's a law that you can point to in the law book, the code, that requires you to file a tax return. Of course there is. Maybe I don't know what it is right then as he was speaking to me, but sure. So naively, I agreed to go off and research it and get back to him. 3.5 months later, I was at that point where I couldn't find the statute that clearly made a person liable, at least not me and most people I know, and I had no choice in my mind except to resign.
I had to leave the IRS because I presented evidence that I had accumulated indicating that the agency was violating the law and violating people's rights. And I asked the agency for a response to my sincere concerns. And the answer I got was that they would not respond to my concerns and that they would provide me with the paperwork necessary to tender my resignation.
You can look through the statutes and look for the law that requires you to pay. And when you do that, you can't identify a law that requires the average person in America who earns a wage and works in private business to pay an income tax.
American citizens, along with the foundation, have been asking the IRS to specifically provide them with the underlying legal foundation upon which they administer and enforce the personal income tax laws in our country.
At the national level, when people would attempt to contact somebody of a much higher authority, say the commissioner, same kind of thing. They would get answers that were in effect non-answers.
You have to understand that an agency which will unlawfully impose a tax that doesn't exist is not going to care. If we, the people, don't know what our rights are, they're not going to tell us.
If Americans just learned that the IRS was actually knowingly deceiving them, that would be enough for them to rise up and put a stop to it.
100% of what is collected is absorbed solely by interest on the federal debt. All individual income tax revenues are gone before 1 nickel is spent on the services taxpayers expect from government. People have been told, that you need this income tax system to fund government, which is absolutely ridiculous. My question is, well, if that's true, how did we fund government from 1776 to 1913?
The main purpose of the income tax is not to raise revenue, but to redistribute wealth and to control society.
A lot of people might say, well, gee, if there wasn't an income tax, what would happen to education? They don't understand that education is paid for the most part, out of state and local taxes, your property tax. People might say, well, how are we going to build and maintain our highways if there's no money coming into the government? We need our highways. There is a tax on every gallon of gasoline that people buy. Proceeds from the income tax do not pay for highway construction.
I believe that in both spirit and substance, our tax system has come to be un-American. Death and taxes may be inevitable, but unjust taxes are not.
This small booklet includes the Constitution of the United States, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. This is a document that every citizen should read. It's a document which freed an entire nation. This is the Internal Revenue Code, and this document, and the unlawful application of this document by the Internal Revenue Service has enslaved the nation that this document attempted to free.
I went through the process to stop volunteering to pay federal income tax since it's voluntary. This is my first check this is my third check after I did that process. So we'll see what the fourth check looks like if it actually says 0. But federal withholding went down, Social Security went down, and even PA state withholding went down a little bit. So I guess it really is voluntary. If you would like to stop paying federal income tax, also send me an email for a consultation. This is for people who do not claim any kids on their federal income tax.